Something that continues to blow my mind every single time I realize it is that each of our emotional states is like its own entire identity. It's like its own entire universe, where each of our emotional states of happy, sad, angry, lustful, whatever it is, each of these emotional states is like its own entire being. And the thing is that each of these emotional states has its own array of an inner dialogue, the way that it talks to itself. Each of these emotional states has its own desires, its own frustrations, its own inclinations of action, where when you're in a certain state, you feel inclined to do certain things. And the far out part is that not only are each of these emotional states like their own entire identity, but each of these emotional states is only relative to itself. And these emotional states don't know or have access to the other ones. Now, allow me to continue to elaborate on what I'm talking about here, because this is pretty far out. Like I said, it continuously blows my mind every single time I realize it. The best way I think that I can describe this is that emotional state A is just emotional state A. It doesn't know that it is that emotional state A. Emotional state B sees emotional state A, but it itself doesn't know it's the emotional state B. And emotional state C is like this meta-emotional state which sees A, B, and itself. The idea is that each of these emotional states is its own identity with its own inner narrative, its own desires, its own ambitions and frustrations and all this stuff. And each of them is relative to itself, where each one doesn't have access to the other one. So the best way that I can describe this is, for me, like think about like when I'm happy, when I'm chilling, when I'm feeling good, when I'm in a flow state, I feel a certain way. And when I look at times that I've been frustrated, times that I've been sad, times that I've been disappointed and angry and all this kind of stuff, it's like I don't know that emotional state. When I'm in this high vibrational state, I don't know that lower vibrational state. And I think, why was I seeing things like that? Why did I do that? Why did I feel inclined to do that? Why was I resonating on that level? When I'm high, when I'm on a high vibrational state, I have access to a different reality. And then, when I'm low, when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling sad, frustrated, angry, nihilistic, depressed, whatever it is, when I'm in that lower vibrational state, it's like I don't have access to that high state that I was just in an hour ago, a day ago, a week ago, whenever it was. Like, to tell you an example in my personal experience, like sometimes, like if I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling low, if I'm in a low, crunchy, as my mom calls it, energetic state where I'm feeling like low, negative, sad, angry, frustrated, bored, whatever it is, lost. Sometimes I'll like watch back one of my videos, and usually when I'm making a video, I'm in a high vibrational state. I'm in a high emotional state. And when I'm feeling down and I watch back one of my videos, I'm like, who is that? Who is that guy? That's me, but I'm in this low emotional state, and it's like I don't have access to the capacity of intelligence, of wisdom, of flow when I'm in that high vibrational state. And it's really far out. It's like what's causing each of these states, like to give you another example, like think about when you're at work. This happens to me as well, like in the same way that when I'm feeling down and like I watch a video or see a moment when I was like really high, when I'm down, I'm like, who the hell is that? Like, I know that that's me, but it's like, how the hell was I so positive? Everything's horrible in that relative emotional state. And for another example, like I'll be at work. And when I get down in my negative, low emotional state, I'm like frustrated and like, man, like this sucks. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be doing something else. And like my coworkers are annoying and I'm very snappy and I'm very frustrated and I'm very nitpicky, and the actions that come out of that state are generally negative. They generally precipitate negative outcomes. And like in that negative state, I don't like my job, I don't like what I'm doing, my coworkers are frustrating me, and I don't like where I'm at and all this stuff. But then I come into a different emotional state. I come into a high state. And in that high state, I love what I'm doing. It's not a big deal that I'm at work. I enjoy my work. I have fun with my coworkers. I have a good time. I get into this flow state where everything is just kind of happening naturally, and it's all this seamless, beautiful flow. And it's this completely different state. And when I'm in that high state, I'm like, why do I make such a big deal about this job, man? Like, it's chill. It's chill. What's going on here is each of these emotional states, like I said, is like its own identity. And the reason that each of these emotional states doesn't have access to the tools and the inner narrative of each of the other states is because there's a discontinuity of self-awareness. When you're in an emotional state, generally speaking, you are that emotional state. You're one with it. You're merged with it. You don't see that you're in that emotional state. You don't see that you're in emotional state A. You are emotional state A. And in that, the inner narrative is you. That's how you feel. Like when you're in a negative state and the inner narrative is, I don't like my job. I don't like where I'm at in my life. I don't like this. Screw that person. That person screwed me over. I don't like this. I'm going to do this. You like are that. You're adhered to the inner narrative of that state. And what comes about, this is the unfortunate part about negative low vibrational states, is that when you're in that negative state, you don't want to be in it. And the actions and the desires that are born out of that negative state generally precipitate further negative actions and outcomes in emotional states. Where when you're in a low state, you want to get out of it. You want to get out of it, but the way that you think you need to get out of that is to do something. I need to do something. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to tell this person to screw off. I'm going to slam stuff around to exert my negative energy. You know what I'm saying? When you're in that negative state, the way that you go about the moment, the way that you carry yourself is in a negative way. And then you come into a high state, you come into a more relaxed, peaceful, serene state, and your actions are flow. Your desires are flow. You don't mind being at work. You don't mind your coworker who's instructing you to do something or not doing something or whatever it is. And when you're in that high state, you're like, why was I being such a bitch in that low state? Why was I making such a big deal out of things when I was in that low vibrational state? And it's because each of these emotional states, you could think of it like moods. Each of these moods is like its own identity. And each of them doesn't know or have access to the other one. And it's far out how you think of like who you are at work or who you are out at a party is different than who you are when you're sitting in a room alone. It's different than who you are when you're home on the weekends. You know what I'm saying? There's these different identities that we adhere ourselves to, and they are brought about through different circumstances. I hope this is making sense. It's really far out. It's the idea that like when you're high, you don't understand why you would ever be low. And when you're low, you don't understand how it would ever be possible to be high again. Like when I'm feeling sad, depressed, angry, I don't have really the access to that high vibrational state of positivity, of love, of being the creator, of being the enjoyer. You know what I'm saying? I don't have access to that clear thinking. I'm in a completely different constellation of inner self-talk, of motive, of drive, of desire. When I'm in a low state, everything frustrates me, but then when I'm in a high state, those same things that frustrated the low self Devin, the low vibration Devin, don't bother me. When I'm in a low state, I think this person screwed me over, screw that person, they're a horrible person, all whatever. And then when I'm in a high space, it's a completely different take on the same situation. It's perspective. And where these perspectives change and differ is in these different emotional states. To share with you another example, there was a teacher, Ram Dass, a beautiful spiritual teacher who has helped me through a lot of stuff. And he shares this story of how he's walking down the street and he's holy as can be. He's Ram Dass, the spiritual being, the servant of God, you know? And then he sees somebody who turns him on, and suddenly he collapses down into turned on Ram Dass, horny Ram Dass. And he says to this person, would you like to go upstairs and see my holy pictures? If you catch the drift of what I'm saying. And he says that who he was a moment ago, before seeing this person that turned him on, is mind blown at who he now is, having seen this person that turned him on. That's the discontinuity of self-awareness. Where, think about it. Think about when you're aroused, when you're turned on, the things that you do. The things that you do to work with that energy of arousal. And then when you come out of that state of being aroused, you're like, damn, bro, that person's a freak. Like, what the hell was that? There's sometimes this being repulsed. Like, it's repulsive what you just did when you were aroused. That's what I'm talking about, where each state is like its own identity that doesn't really know the other one. And the simplest way that I can describe this is I feel like you guys get the idea that when you're down, it seems impossible to ever be high again. And when you're high, it seems like, why was I spending all my time down, man? And you can start to feel like this yo-yo where you're going from state to state, and in each of these states, since there's a discontinuity of self-awareness, you're subject to the inner narrative, the desires, the frustrations, the ambitions of each of those states. Where when you're horny, you're going to want certain stuff. You're going to do certain stuff. You're going to reach out to certain people. But when you're in a different state, you wouldn't reach out to that person. You wouldn't do those things. When you're down, when you're negative, when you're angry, sad, you want to do certain things. You want to try to get out of it. You want to slam stuff around like I was saying, or you bitch and moan about your life. I hate this. This is meaningless. I don't want to do this. But then, without the outside even having to change, when you come into a different emotional state, you're still in the same external situation, but you have a completely different take on it. There's a completely different narrative. And see, the far out part is that each of these states, as I stated a moment ago, each of these emotional states propagates different actions. And the unfortunate part is that when you're in a low vibrational state, you feel inclined to do low vibrational stuff. When you're in a low vibrational state, you don't have access to a high vibrational way of responding to that state. It's only when you're in a high vibration that you can respond to the moment in a high vibrational way. So what happens is when you find yourself to be in a low emotional state, negativity, depression, anger, nihilism, whatever it is, you do stuff that propagates more actions that are relative to that emotional state. When you're angry, you snap at people, which creates more animosity. When you're angry, you talk to yourself. When you're self-loathing, self-pity, when you're hating on yourself and hating on your life situation, you act in ways that are relative to that reality. When you're in that low vibrational state and you say, I hate this job, you may snap and quit. Even though an hour later or a day later or whatever it is, when you're more serene, when you're more zenned out, when you're more chill, when you're a little more collected, you're like, dude, why did I quit? It wasn't the job that was making me negative. It was me that was making me negative. So the far out part about this is that when you're in low vibrational states, you're going to do low vibrational shit. That's scary. And like today, for example, what inspired me to make this video was that today I wasn't feeling so good. Early on in the morning, I was feeling down, I was feeling negative, sad, I was reminiscing on certain things, I was just crunchy and negative and you know what characterized that state? You know what the inner narrative of that state was? It was like frustration and anger and lack of patience, impatience. You know what? Screw all that spiritual shit, man. Screw all that creator nonsense. You know what I mean? I'm pissed. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be doing what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? And here's where we talk about how we create that continuity of self-awareness between all the different states. Because it's in that lack of continuity of self-awareness that we are subject and imprisoned in each of those states. Now, if you were in a high vibrational state, you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself imprisoned in it, but nevertheless, there's a sense of not wanting it to go away. There's a not wanting it to go away. But were you to have a continuity of self-awareness, a wise awareness, you would see that this state is the same as all the other states, and they are flowing, they are ebbing and flowing, and they are all aspects of you. They are all coming and going in regard to what I would understand and describe as our spiritual journey. The reason you get into a certain emotional state is because you were meant to in that moment. Now, what you do in that emotional state is where you either create more of a drag, more negative resistance, or you liberate yourself from that resistance, from that drag, and you essentially like learn the lesson. You don't drag it on. You don't milk it. You don't create more of it because you know and recognize, you have the awareness to see that this is just another state that I'm in. Now, generally speaking, when we're in a low vibe, we are that, where the negative thoughts coming up of self-hatred or hating your job or hating this person or being frustrated and cynical, we adhere to it. There's no space. There's no separation between us and the emotional state. And so what happens is we act on it. Every little thought that comes up, we believe it. We think it's us thinking it. I hate this job. And you don't see that that was a thought you had, which is relative to the emotional state that you're in. You see what I'm saying? This is very subtle stuff. And that's why I'm saying that generally speaking, we we're adhered in that emotional state. I'm pissed off. I hate this job. You know what I mean? But then 2 hours later, you're chilling. You're chilling and you don't mind the job. You know what I mean? So what we want to do is learn how to create that space in being able to see that we are in that emotional state. Like the example I gave in the beginning of how emotional state A is just emotional state A. Anger, it's angry. Emotional state B is able to see I was just in emotional state A. But it has a little bit of a space. It has a little bit of, I see that I was in that emotional state. But nevertheless, emotional state B doesn't know that it's kind of in this other state. Emotional state C is this meta state which sees emotional state A, emotional state B, and itself. That's really the best way that I can describe it. And what characterizes emotional state C is awareness. Seeing that that was emotional state A, I was in that. Then I moved into emotional state B, where I saw being in emotional state A, and now I'm in emotional state C, where I see all of it. So the idea is to create space where you are not a product of your emotional state. Because when you're a product of your emotional state and there's no space, you're going to act on each and every impulse that comes up within that emotional space. So the idea is to create space. The idea is to create awareness, a sort of distinction between you and your emotional state. And what that does is it allows you to see that you're in that emotional state, where it creates contemplation. It creates a moment of consideration, where when you're pissed and you're thinking about putting your 2 weeks in, or just walking out and quitting, or you're on the verge of telling this person to screw themselves, you see, okay, I'm angry right now. I'm in a negative emotional state. Is that really what I want to do? Is that really what I would do were I to be in a higher, more relaxed and tranquil state? It creates space. It creates, like I said, a distinction between that negativity and you. You realize that you're in a negative state. So what to do? I mean, I don't know. I'm in the same boat as you, man. I'm just talking about like how I go about my emotional state. But what I do is when I sense that I'm in a negative emotional state, seeing that I'm in a negative emotional state is the way out. It's all over at that point. When you see that you're in a negative state, You're not going to allow yourself to be completely adhered to it. And it's in being completely adhered to it that all the negative, nasty shit comes out. So what you need to do is allow yourself to be in the state. Don't try to push it away, because that's one of the negative inclinations we have when we're in a negative state. I need to get out of this, and we blame our job, or we blame a person, or we blame ourselves, and we try to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We try to get out of the negativity by being negative about how we're going to get out of it. So the idea is to let yourself feel. Like I said, these emotional states are arising and passing away spontaneously. They're just a coming show. And in my opinion, it's all a teaching. It's all different aspects of ourselves. And yeah, it's awesome to be soaring in the ecstasy of high, clear thinking and love and beauty. And yeah, that actually reminds me of another thing, that in negative state, you hate this person. But in a high state, you have compassion for this person. What does that tell you? That tells you that there's a discontinuity of awareness between those different planes. How can you hate someone in one state and then have compassion for someone in another one? And shouldn't that vast difference show you that you shouldn't act on every single feeling you have in whatever emotional state you're in? So the idea is to allow the emotional state to be. Because if you try to push it away, if you try to bypass it and convince yourself that I'm not mad, I'm fine, you push it away, you repress it, you pretend it's not there, you lash out and act on it. I'm so angry, you know what I'm saying? I keep bringing up the job because it's a good example. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody having a bad day, they're at work, somebody does something at work that they don't like and they lash out and they quit. What you need to do is allow the state you're in, and allow yourself to feel it. Because when you feel the inclination to push away how you feel, or to deny how you feel, or to pretend that what you're feeling isn't valid, like where you're embarrassed to be sad, or embarrassed to be angry, or whatever it is, guilt and shame and all this kind of stuff, to try to push it away is to tell yourself it's an insult to the emotional intelligence of your body. That state is there for a reason. You need to let it move through you. You need to let it happen. You need to let it be. A while ago I made this video called Let Life Cleanse You. And I was sharing the example of how our emotional states are in response to the flow of life. The flow of life. We're not in the same state always. You know what I'm saying? The idea of this too shall pass. Are you still in that bad mood you were in yesterday? How about that good mood you were in 3 days ago? Are you still in that state? It's all flowing. It's all ebbing and flowing, coming and going, and it's in response to a unification with life itself. It's all just happening. It's all teaching. And our job is to stay open to that flow. And when we're down, when the negative stuff is happening, we feel this inclination. I got to get out of this, man. This sucks. I hate this state. But like I was saying, how each state is relative to itself and doesn't know or have access to the other ones. When you're feeling down, you don't really have access to the high states of being because you're down. You're in a negative, nasty state. So what do? You allow it. You don't do anything about it. You let yourself be down. You let yourself be angry. And be careful, because I'm not saying let yourself act impulsively and, do all this negative stuff. But what I'm saying is acknowledge the emotional state you're in. You kind of find this happy medium, this flow state of, even though you're pissed, even though you're depressed, even though you're whatever, you allow that state to be, and you carry on in this sort of neutral allowance, if that makes sense. And by allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, you give your body permission to let it go. When you're feeling negative and you do something about it because you feel like you shouldn't be in a negative state, it's like stoking the fire. The negativity is the fire, and trying to get out of it or pretend you're not in it or outsmart it is like stoking the fire with wood. When you allow that emotional state to be, it's like just sitting by the fire. And when you don't feed the fire dies. The fire dies. You know what I'm saying? So when you allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, you're giving yourself the permission to let it go. And the way that life naturally occurs when we're like flowing with it is it goes from state to state to state to state to state. It's this constant flux. It's this constant motion. It's this fluidity where it's all going. You're not still angry about that thing that happened last week. You're not still soaring in ecstasy about that thing that happened a year ago. You see what I'm saying? It's flow. It's flow. And we can feel these inclinations where when we're in like a high state, we want to grab onto it and keep it. All that does is strangle it. All that does is strangle it, and you get all analytical, and you sort of dematerialize it. You piece it apart. And when you're in a negative state, you try to push it away. It's attraction and aversion. And we try to keep the happy and push away the bad. But the very inclination to keep the happy and push away the bad is what keeps us locked in them. You know? I mean, in the sense of the happy, it's what pushes away the happy. And in the sense of the negative, it's what keeps us in the negative. So what we need to do is develop this I keep calling it like meta-awareness. We need to develop this holistic awareness of the fact that we are in an emotional state. We're not wrong for feeling what we're feeling, and to act as though we shouldn't be feeling that is to say, hey, mind, body, soul, you're wrong for feeling the way you're feeling, and I'm going to step up to the plate, whoever this I is, I'm going to step up to the plate and get out of this negative state because I feel like I shouldn't be in this state. That's insulting yourself. You don't even realize it in the moment, but it's saying you're dumb for feeling what you're feeling. It's saying you're wrong. You're invalid for feeling that feeling. The trick is to let yourself feel. And the hard part about this is that might entail being upset, being sad, being angry for hours on end. But in allowing yourself to feel, you don't feel this sort of instinct to act on it. You let it be. You let it be. You let it be. You know, and meditation, mindfulness, becoming to the awareness, creating that continuity of awareness where yes, you're angry. Yes, you're sad. Yes, you're depressed. Yes, you're happy. But I am not these emotions. I'm experiencing an emotional state, and I'm going to allow it in the same way I allow happy states. You know what I'm saying? You allow it, and what that does is it allows it to move through you naturally. You don't have to do anything to get out of a negative state. The very trying to do something to get out of it is what entrenches you in it more and more. Because as you realize that your actions to get out of it are not fruitful, it pisses you off more. It makes you more depressed. It makes you more angry. You know, and to talk about the actions that we take to try to get out of our negative states, think of drinking, drugs, sex, eating, you know, arguing, quitting our job, moving. We make these rash decisions as a means of trying to get ourselves out of the negative state, trying to escape that negative state, which is not only making it worse for us in the long run, but it's insulting ourselves. It's saying, I shouldn't feel down. Here, I'm going to drink. Now I'm better. I shouldn't feel down. You know, like maybe you've experienced where when you're in a negative state, you feel the inclination to reach out to a certain person. Maybe somebody that wasn't so good to you in the past. And then when you're in a high state, you don't feel any inclination to reach out to them because you're chilling. You're chilling. You see what I'm saying? This happens a lot in relationship contexts where when you're depressed or whatever, you feel, I'm going to reach out to them. I miss them. Notice how you only miss them when you're depressed. You only want to reach out when you're not happy inside. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about the quality and purity of your intention in making that action? So there's been times where I'm really down. Like I'm really down. I'm really upset about something and I want to tell somebody off. I'm really upset. But instead of acting on that impulse, since I have that meta-awareness that I am in a negative state, I don't really want to act out of it. I don't want to listen to the impulses that I'm having in this negative state. And I allow it to pass. I stop feeding the fire. And then an hour later, 2 hours later, that negative state dissipates. And I think to myself, now that once I return into a higher state, a state characterized by more clear thinking, more mental clarity, I think to myself, I am so glad I didn't do what I wanted to do when I was pissed off. I am so glad I didn't do what I wanted to do when I was sad. Because you can see that in that negative state, you have it is its own universe. So be weary, be cautious, be mindful. Bring mindfulness to every emotional state you have, because there are certain emotional states, generally more low vibrational states of not feeling good, anger, depression, sadness, whatever it is. What we feel inclined to do in those states is not in our best interest. It's a means of wanting to lash out at somebody or blame ourselves. It's a means of trying to escape that state, you know? But the thing to do is to let it happen, let it be. Because when you let yourself be where you are, yeah, it might feel like shit until you're soaring again in the high energy where it feels amazing. You don't try to do anything about that. But when you're down, let it be. Let it be. And it will pass naturally. Create that space, create that mindfulness to see, I'm in a negative state. And I don't want to act out of this negative state because it'll only reap negative seeds. Negativity only breeds negativity when you act out of that space. So the art is to let yourself feel. The very arising of that negative state is that energy wanting to move through you. And if you try to outsmart it, if you belittle it, if you think you're not good enough because you're upset about whatever, it makes it worse. You lock it inside of you. You store it in your mind and body and cells and spirit. You store that shit within you. All of these emotional states coming up, it's like a river, man. It's like a flow, and it wants to move and express itself. We're just sitting, watching the river of our lives go by. Happiness, sadness, anger, depression, guilt, shame, regret, trauma, passion, desire, whatever. All these states is like a flowing river. And it's all this stuff flowing in the river, leaves and little sticks and stuff. And when we act on a certain state, when we act out of a certain state, when we try to push it away or whatever it may be, or keep it, it's like diving into the water to try to grab that stick or that leaf. Where now we're not flowing, we're not watching the flow of our life, but rather we're subject to it. We're trapped in it, you know? So the idea is to sit on the bank and watch it flow, watch it all go by. Don't get mesmerized or frustrated or scared with what's flowing in the river, because it's all the natural flow of life. So I hope this video makes sense. Like, essentially what I'm saying is that each of our moods, each of our states, it's its own entity, it's its own ego, it's its own being. But really that's not the truth, but generally we act as though that is the truth, you know? And when we're negative, we act in a negative way. When we're happy and clear and loving, we act in a happy, clear, and loving way. And the idea is to create a holistic, wholesome awareness of the entirety of it, to see that these are all just emotional states arising within you, and to let each of them come and have its time. Don't insult yourself by thinking you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. And that'll work wonders in your life by allowing yourself to be right where you're at. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, consider leaving a thumbs up so that this video can get recommended to more people like you.